Welcome to Accounting Year YouTube channel.
Hi, so I've admitted everyone already.
Oh, you've
So there's none waiting. Yes.
No, all right. So the last session we over 60, if I remember correctly. So I'm just looking at it that we're just barely about 12, right? Okay, no wahala. The good thing is that the session will be recorded and be available on the YouTube channel. For those who are yet to subscribe to the YouTube channel, you can simply go to, let me quickly show you the YouTube channel. Share my screen. Yeah. So typically, most times for webinars we've held in the past, right, we try to ensure that such webinars are available on the YouTube channel so that even if you get to miss the webinar, you can always go back to the YouTube channel. So it has, for example, the last session we held, this is it. This is a mock interview. This is interviewing for accounting roles. We had the 3 sessions talking about payment management accounts from trial balance all the way to your statement of financial position, your cash flow, and your statement of cash flow, income statement, and statement of financial position, right? Yes. We also had other ones. We had a practical one guiding financial reporting for the oil and gas session. The other ones are not webinars, they're more of just videos that are recorded or someone else recorded where we just discuss other things that we feel were important to accountants. Right. So that's just me running through the YouTube channel in case you've not been there before. Right. By my time is exactly 2 p.m. 10 minutes past 2. And what we agreed was by 2:10, we'll start the webinar. I want to be sure that everybody can hear me clearly because I know we had issues with sound the last time, just to be sure that we don't have such issues.
The sound is fine, so you can continue.
Okay, great. All right, so just to just see my face, don't worry, not. So that's me, that's me. I'm trying to explain, do what I love to do best, share knowledge. For those who are new to Accounting Yard is the body of professional accountants, where we help to share, learn, and help. And the idea is that over time, we've understood that we are not all on the same level, right? But the only way we can all grow, help one way or the other to either support the Nigerian economy is by supporting one another, right? So we share knowledge, we share books, we share materials, we share research and development in accounting. We help in terms of helping people get jobs, provide solutions during the course of their jobs, provide solutions during the course of challenges they face accounting-wise, right? And we learn. We're learning right now. We learn in various means and all, and we do that through various platforms which are available on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Telegram, on WhatsApp, and that way just to help everybody one way or the other, right? So in case you are not following us on any of the social media platform, I encourage you to, because you would always learn 1 or 2 things during the course of the webinar, right? Or during the course of following the YouTube platform, right? So that's fine. Given that as maybe, I think someone is trying to send me a message on. Oh, Raji, you can't hear me. I don't know if you can, but I have not had any issue with anybody not being able to hear me now. So you can confirm you can hear me now, because so that I would know, and we're sure that everybody can hear me clearly. Yeah? Loud and clear. Okay, that's fine. So, like I said, we'll do a quick recap of the last session, just to bring those who were not available in the last session up to speed. Right. So the idea behind this particular training is analyzing the bank statement. Now, over time, as accountants, we get to start or be engaged on jobs as young accountants where what we first find out is that the company has no records. So the first step we are forced to do is actually analyzing the bank statement so that we can build from the incomplete record to the starting point. So one of the key things that we get to first do is analyzing the bank statement. Now, from experience and discussing with young accountants, we found out that that's a common problem that covers a lot of startups. So, and trust me, like you understand rightly, our accounting class, whether ACC or ICANN, never covered anything of such. So as young accountants, we are faced with that opportunity, or we face with that problem, right? And for every problem is an opportunity. So ability to analyze the bank statement to at least give it, you may not get the 100% accurate record, but giving it something close that gives it a true reflection of what the business is, right? Even for auditors, there's what we call materiality, meaning that there are cases, the possible misstatement that could occur, but it's not material enough to actually misstate the financial statement. So the idea is, how can we get the books to a reasonable point, given the fact that we have incomplete records, right? And the challenge we are faced with is analyzing the bank statement. So last class, or last webinar, which was last week precisely, we talked about what are the things we need to do. So I'll quickly rush us through, and so that we'll get to see and ask possible questions. So generally, we talked about what we talked about: information requests, things to look out for, creating the structures, questions to ask, and consolidating the final output. Today's webinar is focused on actually now doing the do. Last webinar was talking the talk and making people understand the principle that will guide you in actually executing such a challenge, right? So one of the first things we talked about was information request, right? Okay, we talked about what accounting is and all. We've done that, right? So like I said, most startups don't have proper accounting records, only get to employ an accountant when their records are bad or they need for funding equity. An accountant takes up such role requires the ability to come up with something level of record, and it comes immediately from the ability to analyze the bank statement. During your first conversation with the clients or owners of the business, you need to come up with an information request list. So what do I mean by this? Now, when you're employed or when you're given such an opportunity to interact with someone with incomplete record, right, or a startup business, now, in your first level of conversation, right, you need to understand the business and you need to come up with a list of information you will need from that person, because those information will help you to properly analyze the bank statement, right? So when we talk about information request list, one thing I try to make people understand is understand the business, right? And in understanding the business, you need to understand all the parties that one way or another interact with the business. Now, key to us, we identify, because whether I like it or not, a business is driven by people, right? People and processes. So the people are either individuals or corporate organizations. Now, for corporate organizations, we're talking about the customers and the vendors. The vendors are those who supply goods or services to the business. So most likely, when you say bank statement, you see transactions with such vendors or individuals that business liaise with, right? If you understand the people they deal business with, you know the kind of transactions they enter, you know how to treat such transactions appropriately. Similar way, if you know their customers and you know the services they deliver, by the time you see the customers, you know how to treat transactions with such customers. Another set of people that you want to get is the list of employees. Why are the list of employees important? Now, typically, if you understand, if you're working as an accountant, you realize that certain businesses at times disburse funds to employees so that they could carry out tax or operations on behalf of the business in terms of floats, petty cash, and all. So when you see disbursement to them, you want to know what are those kind of transactions and what are they meant for. So disbursement to employees will come in as salary, they come in as floats to carry out the circular tax. So if you know who the employees are, when you see transactions relating to them, you can know, oh, these transactions you are seeing, they are most likely either a float to either execute a tax or emolument to that employee, right? So getting a list of employees is also important. Now, I also made mention that that it's good to know the list of shareholders and directors. Typically, for most businesses, you have transactions with shareholders and directors because one, like, you know, when a business starts up, it's expected that their shares are issued to the owners of the business. When shares are issued to the owners of the business, they one way or the other disburse funds to pay for the shares issued to them, right? So automatically, when you see inflows from shareholders, there are two things. It's either they're giving out equity, right, based on the shares issued to them, or they're giving out debt, right? That means they're giving funding to the business to be able to operate. So when you see inflows, transactions with them, you need to be able to understand what are those transactions, what they relate to, and know how to treat them, right? Now, list of directors, typically most businesses, most startups, usually have funds, and those funds that are disbursed or are with either incurred or with the directors, they are either related to the business or they are not related to business. Last class, I tried to explain the concept of REM, right? Typically, you expect that any transaction with directors, you need to be sure that that transaction is meant for the business, right? Is exclusively reasonable necessary, right? For that business, for it to be treated as a transaction for the business. If it's not for the business, then you need to now be able to create an account, which usually people call the director's account, so that transactions with them are captured in them, so that they either asset or liability of their loans that are treated properly as loan to directors and all. So you need to understand transactions with them. So I may mention the fact that typically most businesses would have assets, right? So if you do a physical verification of the assets in the business premises, right, you have to identify the list of assets. If you interact with people who are either involved in core operations or are familiar with the business enough, you're able to identify who are the people that supply this asset. If you know people that supply this asset, they form part of your vendors list, and you can see transactions with them, and you can identify that, oh, this transaction related to acquisition of assets, right? So that's important. Now, I also advise that request for bank statement. Don't request for one bank statement. Ask for all bank statements, and take notes. Because they start up, ensure that whatever bank statement they give to you, it starts from zero. Because once you get one that has a balance, that's starting from a balance, it means that you most likely will meet transactions, right? Okay. Now, I also talked about identify what are the major sources of revenue and what are the major sources of expenses. During interaction with the owner of the business, based on the nature of business, you need to identify what are those things that are key to those business. What are the kind of expenses they incur? Rent, welfare, repairs and maintenance, office operations, printing, communication. So identify those, what are the transactions that you think the business incurs? Based on the core line of business, you most likely, if they are a manufacturing company, what are the key raw materials they purchase? Identify them so that you know, oh, who are the people that sell these things and all. It helps you. What are the major sources of revenue? Identify them. By the time you are done with that, right, you have to come with a very robust list that will guide you in analyzing the bank statement. Because, like I told people in the last class, right, by the time you understand this list and you understand the business, then when you're analyzing the bank statement, it makes it a lot easier, right? So next step, right, will now be, explain about things you need to look out when you're analyzing a bank. Like I said, most times, a chunk of bank transaction in bank statement linked to bank charges. And good enough, typical bank charges are your normal transaction, transaction, right? When you make a payment to a vendor, typically the bank charges you 50 naira. I said 50 naira because the amount is actually 50 naira plus VAT, which now makes it 53.75, right? Before the new VAT Act, right, before Finance Act of 2019, it was 52 naira 50 kobo, right? But it's now 53 naira 75 kobo, right? So that's the typical transaction. Then you have like your stamp duty. I think anything above 10,000, anytime you receive an inflow above 10,000, they charge you 50 naira, right? You also know your account maintenance charges, you have your SMS charges, you have your auto token, you have your bank, your checkbook, and all. Those transactions, usually, imagine for every transaction that you do, whenever vendor you pay, there's a 53 naira 75 kobo. For every inflow you receive over 10,000, there's a 50 naira. Meaning that to a large extent in your bank statement, a huge chunk of the transactions usually are bank charges, right? So I mean to identify them makes it easy for you to be able to analyze the bank statement, right? And that's what I said. I said if you have over 5 years of banking of bank statements, that's more problem for you, because the longer the bank statement or the older the bank statement, the more difficult analyzing the bank statement is for you. Now, I said creating a structure. So I talked about the use of data validation to help you create a list of revenue streams, list of classes of transactions, list of customers, list of employees. And I talked about the kind of structures that you could have. And I gave examples here where I said customer, CVS, Elvis, vendor, V-Holiday. The idea is to put a structure so that even if you come back to that your analysis 2 months from now, you may not know who Elvis is, but by the time you see customer, Elvis, you automatically know that person is a customer. By the time you see because you know V stands for vendor, you know that it relates to a vendor. By the time you see E-, you have to tell that's an employee. So it's not just putting the name of the person or the name of the business. It's also putting something that will help you know that this transaction, it relates to this kind of individual, it relates to this kind of stuff. So it makes it easy for you to identify what transaction, what it relates to, right? Okay, so I now give a simple example of what your bank analysis looks like. And I put columns at the top here where I said amount. And I said amount in the sense that typically your bank statement will come with maybe debit or credit. So most times you want to be able to change this structure to reflect positive when it's an inflow and negative when it's an outflow. So it's clear. So that just by seeing the amount, you know that the money is an inflow or outflow. Then talk about nature of transaction. So I said nature of transaction, depending on, by the time you understand the business, be able to know how to classify transactions, right? And based on that classification of transaction, you can now know, oh, okay, this transaction relates to this level of expense or this level of income and all. So I said that's the column. Then if you know who to deal with, because typically you want to be able to know what transaction relates to who. So it helps you in proper analyzing them, right? And I said have those columns. And I said you may not limit to just 3 columns, depending on the nature of the business you're involved in, you may have more columns. Typically, as you're analyzing the bank statement, there's high probability that you may not be able to properly classify a transaction. So most times you may have clauses like, oh, unclassified inflow, unclassified outflow, and you put a remark. Because by the time you analyze the bank, you will most likely have to interact with some people that are core with operations, that understand transactions, right? That can easily tell you, oh, when you see this transaction, they can tell you what it relates to. So you need to isolate those transactions you cannot classify and interact with the end users or those that are core involved in operations that understand inflows and outflows, right? Based on the nature of the business. Like I told someone, typically for most businesses, if you have like a sales rep, it's easier to interact with the sales rep to identify inflows because they are the ones that are involved with collections and dealing with customers. Do you get? People that are core with operations that interact with vendors in terms of maybe a procurement department or people that are involved with transactions that support the business operations, they will tend to know the vendors and when they pay and how much was paid because most times the vendors will reach out to them and say, okay, I've not received my money, what's happening? They tend to say, they get the telex and send to them and say, oh, this transaction has occurred, they paid, this is telex, this is it. So they may have a form of tracker where they can tell you, oh, this transaction relates to this. The one key thing I tried to mention was the fact that, see, transactions, no matter how bad businesses are, one way or the other, some of them usually have a form of record keeping. So don't assume that they have no record. Just ask them. Don't tell them, oh, they have a student of, they have a management account. If you ask them management account, they may be lost. Ask them, please, what kind of records do you keep to track how you incur expenses or how you record or how you track payment or sales to customers? Oh, okay, I have this booklet where I write down, anytime I sell any product, I write it down, I write, oh, sold to Mr. ABC. Oh, I have this Excel that I usually just track to see how well I'm doing, and I put transactions as they occur in them. Ask them those questions. By the time you collect such booklets, it can help you in properly doing the analysis of the bank statement. Right, so yeah, questions to ask and all, one way or another, I've explained them. Right, so the final part was the consolidation of the output. Now, the good thing is that if you properly analyze the bank statement and you've analyzed it properly, after proper classification, you can use a function on Excel known as pivot to now analyze it and now shows you the final outcome of what you've analyzed. You can know those things that you need to do follow up with and those things that you properly analyzed, and that way it resolved that, right? So this was a quick, I know I was quite fast. Like I said, it was just a quick revision of the last class. I don't know if anybody has any question before we go deep dive into today's section, which shouldn't take time. Yeah, any question? So would I say there's no question by anyone? Any question? Trust me, like I tell people most times, right? This training is only as interesting as the kind of question that have been asked, right? Because trust me, we all have experience, and the level of experience, the function helps us a lot, right? So, okay, Agu. So Agu, sorry, hands is up. Okay, Agu, you can ask your question, right?
Okay. I'm here, yeah. Sorry to take you back a bit.
No problem.
Can you demonstrate how you arrived at that Excel where you have like vendors, it has a V,
Oh, okay.
You
So don't
have
worry.
revenue, it has an R or something like that.
Okay, so the thing is that I'm to be very honest with you, during the course of today's class, because today's class is more hands-on than last one, right? So
I know, yeah.
you see us recreate a sample data around this.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
this is it. Like if you can see my screen, that's it. But I would we'll do that when we are working on actual data today.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that's it. I don't need any other question. Okay, so in the absence of none, right, I think we should just escape. So now, this is a typical bank statement, right? I can hide this, yep. And we have transaction list, right? So we can ignore the balance for here. This was just a simple data that we came across. I was just trying to explain how we could use this to analyze our bank statement. Now that we have this, like I showed in the PowerPoint, we have amount, nature of transaction, customer, and remark. In this particular scenario, we don't know the information, right? We don't have details about the nature of transaction at all. Basically, what we'll be doing is analyzing the bank statement, identifying vendors and customers, and based on those people, we're able to create a data validation list, which we'll make use of, right? And the idea is that in this particular case, we've not interacted with anybody, we're just analyzing bank statements so that we can put in categories. Because typically, most times, when you see a vendor, there are some vendors that are, how do I put it, they are Google hero, as Yoruba will say it. That means they do a lot of transaction with the company. And so you cannot say this particular transaction, you can say, oh, this particular transaction relates to this nature of service. You may do a lot of services with the business, right? But for now, what we'll do is analyze it. We need to classify transactions into who the customers. And also what we'll also do is that we need to put transactions into things like bank charges or other transactions. So typically what I try to do is I create a sheet, which I call my PV sheet. Mute. Hello. Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. So I was saying that we created a sheet called the data validation, and that is where we'll put in the structures of transactions we're involved in, right? So for example, I name this column nature of transaction, right? Typically, obviously, every business wants to make revenue, right? I can put purchase of raw material. I can put staff costs. I can put rent. I can put repair and maintenance. So I can put salary. I can put communication. I can put internet. What other nature of transaction can you think of that a business will be involved in? Security expense. Hotel and accommodation. Yeah, what other expense can a business be involved in? Any suggestion? Okay, in the absence of none, I can put a list called, okay, so let's see, suggestion, energy, okay? Someone mentioned energy, so let's just put energy. So energy will cover NEPA, cover diesel, cover fuel, and all those categories, right? So we have that category. So we have this category called customer, vendor, and employee, right? Now, because of we don't have the list already, if we had the list already, we'll just put the list here. But because in particular scenario, we don't know them, right? Good. Some mentioned bank charges. I almost forgot that bank charges. Because we don't have the list yet, I will just assume that customers will take the first 5 position. I create like maybe 3 spaces, and I say vendors will take the next maybe 10 positions, right? Then employees can take the next batch of sections, right? Now, the idea for me is that, so as we come across transactions, I come across individuals who fall into category, we put them here, and we move on. So someone said interest income, okay? Yeah, possibly can have interest income. Yeah? So I know that this section covers my customers, and I know that what will happen is that I would have costs, colon, this, and we put it all the way down. Right, so if you put the person name, all just need to do is this colon, this, and we get our customer. Right, so as soon as you get customer, you put their names here. It feeds into this. If you look at the formula, we said this ampersand this, and that combines it too. Now we said this place will be for vendor. We say vendor is V colon this, right? You can easily just drag this down. And as soon as we get the vendor's name, we do this ampersand this. And we have the vendor's name, and it's listed there. And we have all our vendors, right? For employee, you can use maybe EMP, and we have our column, and we drag it down. I have it this colon, this. And we hold shift, pressing the arrow key down, and press Ctrl D, and we have all those categories. Now, we've created the structure in place. So all we just need to do, identify a name, we put them here, right? And it fits into this place, and we have our data validation list. Now that we've created this list, we need to now come into this area to now create our list. So we highlight, for nature of transactions, we highlight everything all the way down to the end, right? We go to data, click here, data validation, click here, the list, click here, click on data validation, and we can select this. Typically, I don't allow it end here, I drag it all the way down, so that if there are new classifications that are coming, if I introduce them, it will be in the list. What do I mean? If you look carefully, the last classification is interest income. If I press OK, you have just interest income here. Interest income is the last item on this list. However, in future, I may come across more transactions that I feel that should be in my classification. What do I need to do? I come here. So let me think, what classification what other transaction that comes up that I think that are important to a business? Let's call it transportation. Let's call vehicle expense. What other expense can come again that we know that most businesses incur? Let's call legal fee. Let's call it accounting service. Yeah, we've added more. So if I come back to my bank statement analysis, I can easily pick these additional things without a problem, right? Before it was interest income, but I have the additional categories. So someone mentioned fines and penalty, okay? So I can put a category called fines and penalty, right? Okay, that's fine. So now that I have all my classifications, I have it or data validation available. If I click on this arrow, I can select any classification as deemed fit based on nature of transaction, right? And that's fine. The next list will now be my customer list, right? I can customer vendor list, same process, highlight all the transactions that I have listed. Yeah, I go again to data, come here, click on my data validation. Wow. So someone said, is the session being recorded? Let me check. Okay, it's being recorded. So Raji, your fear is being recorded, don't worry. Right, okay, so I've highlighted it. And I have my click on this, data validation. Select here, click on list, select my source, come back to my DV sheet, and I can select everyone down all the way to the bottom. Right, like I did for that one, I leave spaces because of additions in future, and I click OK. Right, so I have my list here. It has no name because I've not added any name. So for example, we come to the first time where you are seeing Prime Royal Services Limited. This is the first time, so you can easily copy this name. For this particular scenario, it's an outflow. So desired probability relates to a vendor, right? In this particular scenario, I come to my place where I have vendors. I put in the Prime Atlantic, and with that, bam, I have my first vendor. I go back to my data validation. I can easily select, and I can select my first vendor, right? Now, aside that, for amount, like I said, this is a D, right? A D represents a debit, a C represents a credit. And we said that a D represents an outflow, while a C represents an inflow. So we just typically use a simple if statement equal to if. If takes 3 arguments, the logical test, what it should do when it is true and what it should do when it's false, right? So what we need to do, if this is equal to a D, which we put in brackets, it means it's an outflow. What I need to do, I put a comma and I put minus the amount. Obviously, for every transaction in the bank, there's either an inflow and outflow. If it's not an outflow, then it's an inflow. So I just put a comma and choose the value, and I close my bracket and press enter. So I put my value as coming, right? I can easily just double click at the edge here, and all my transactions are clearly identified without a problem, right? Now, I have the way to convert my transactions into positive and negative figures. Bam, and I'm done and dusted, right? With that part. Now, like I said, typically I don't go to other transactions. I first go to the easiest of them all. First, I can select here at the top right corner, which helps me highlight everything. I can use my shortcut key on the keyboard. I press Alt-A-T, right? And that helps me bring the filter on it. Now with this, it makes my life easy. Like I said, this particular bank statement is old. I think it's 2.5, but if it was more recent transaction, you will see 53.75. I know how much my bank charges is standard, bam, what they are. I can easily come to my amount column and I can unfilter everything and choose 52 and 50. And the largest thing, I've gotten at least a chunk of most of my transaction charges, and I can click OK. I have them all listed here. If you look at this bank statement, for example, I have close to how many transactions? 71 transactions that relate to bank charges. Let me unfilter, and let me check how many transactions I have. I have 145, meaning that just by analyzing just my bank charges alone, over 70 transactions have been, over 50% of the transactions have been covered, which makes my life at least, means 50% of the job has been done. So once again, I select 50 and 52, right? So I'll show you a trick. Typically, I can copy and just choose bank charges, right? But I'll show you a simple trick that will help me put bank charges in all this without a problem, right? What do I need to do? I would select using click down, hold all the way to the bottom, right? To where I want bank charges to stop. I stop there, right? I go back to the top. I press F2. If you notice, can you see the cost of blinking? I press equal to, I select bank charges, right? Then in Excel, there's what you call absolute, relative, and mixed referencing. Now, if you want a particular function, right, to refer to a particular cell and you want it to stay fixed on that cell, use a function or the Excel key called F4. It helps you toggle between absolute, relative, and mixed referencing. by assigning a dollar sign around the number, right? Around the cell reference. So I do that, I press F4. You notice, can you see the dollar sign around I6? That's what you call absolute. That's what I want to achieve because I want it to stay fixed on I6, which I've chosen as bank charges. I hold my control key and I press enter. If you notice, all the cells there have been populated with bank charges, right? And I'm done with all the bank charges. I don't need to repeat myself. I've done that. I'm not copying and pasting, sorted. I click this, I select all the transactions, I press OK. I select everything because what has happened, if I click here, you will see there's a formula that is there. If I click here, there's a formula that is there. I don't want it to be a formula. So I select all the cells here. I press Ctrl C and I press Alt ESV, right? And press enter, right? That way, formulas are no more reflecting. I am done with all my analysis for bank charges. I don't need to select who it relates to because obviously bank charges is bank charges, my bank I'm dealing with, right? If I select here and I select blanks, I'm only seeing the transactions that are left. I need to properly analyze. In this particular scenario, because I don't know who the vendors, what they do, I may not be able to analyze the other transactions into what it relates to. I typically assume that all transactions relating to inflows are payment by customers. So I'll just put anything linked to inflow that is not a reversal of a bank charge. I'll assume that it is an inflow by a customer and has to do with revenue, right? So typically there are two approaches. I can easily come here and choose C and press OK. And I have all my inflows clearly stated. I can easily, by the time I identify all my customers, right, anything linked to inflows, I can go further to discuss with the owner of this or the business owner to understand more are most likely inflows. Like I said most time, typically, depending on the nature of the business, inflows may not be a lot. But some businesses, like a retail business, obviously inflows will be a lot. But for most businesses, you buy things, you pay vendors more than you actually get revenue. What I mean, and not in terms of value, but in terms of the number of transactions, right? Typically, your inflows, you may have like almost 10 customers, and they just pay you maybe 2 or 3 times in a month, and that's what. You may have a lot of vendors that supply various things that make up it. So that's usually fewer. So typically, like I said, I will do the same approach I did for bank charges. I select revenue, right? Click here, highlight all the cells down, press F2, press equal to, select just the cell on top, right? And I can press Fn and F4 to lock the cell. I press Ctrl and Enter so that it populates everywhere, and I'm done with that. I can unselect everything, right? Unselect everything here. Select all the way down, Ctrl C, Ctrl V. Ctrl C, then Alt ESV, right? That's what helps me do that, and I'm done with this. If I unselect this and choose blanks, and I press OK, how many transactions do I have? Right, so I have 54. So 54 transactions. And with that reduces the number of transactions I have left, right? So I continue. I'm only focused on the transactions that are left. I don't have Abdul services before. I copy vendor's name, enter, go to my data validation, put him here, and I can go back to my bank analysis, come here, select my next vendor. AHA Media Services, I copy, it's new, not on my list. I go to my data validation, include him on this place. I can easily come back here and choose AHA Services. Ziggy Places Limited, I don't have him, so I copy. I go to my data validation, I put him here, appears there, go back to my bank charges, and I choose Ziggy. Now, this may look like a lot of work initially, right? But over time, by the time you do it for like 20 transactions, you'd have already gotten a chunk of most of the vendors that you're dealing with. And by the time you do that, instead of you going back to update your data validation sheet, you've just selected once. Now, one thing that data validation helps you do is that ensure your data are consistent. So whenever you select Prime Royal Hospital, it's the same Prime Royal. You're not mixing their names, right? That's one of the importance of data validation. I copy money services. I go to my data validation. I include my vendor list. Go to my bank charges. I can select him down. Money. It's word. Copy. Right. Come to my data validation. Put in my list. Come back to my bank analysis. Select him. Yeah. I have Eurosports Limited. Control C. Come to my data validation. Put here. Come back. I can come here, drag down. Yeah. Novelsis Limited. I can copy. Come to my data validation. Put it here. Come back to my bank analysis. Yeah. Humano communication. See. Come here. Drop bank analysis. Sorry. So you have this. Come here. Data validation. Up here. Come back to my bank analysis. Yeah. So I don't know if you understand the principle right now. So this will continue like that, right? Then as I identify transaction, you classify them like that. Now the good thing is that by the time you come up with a list of your vendors, by the time you're discussing with them, if you go back to the owners of the business, you can now be able to identify the nature of transaction. Oh, this vendor supplies me raw material. Oh, this vendor is my accounting guy. He helps me provide accounting services. Oh, this vendor does repairs and maintenance. So he helps me handle repairs of our vehicles. Oh, Ziggy, he supplies stationery to the business. Monet, oh, Monet is the one that, the property where we are staying is the one that rents it to us. Oh, Earthwood Resources, they are the one that supply most of the fixed assets we own. Oh, Eurosports, they are the one that book flight tickets whenever our MD wants to travel and it's not so let's say hotel and accommodation or travels, let's just call it travels. All right. So by the time you have that list, you're able to put down, oh, this vendor, this is what it does. With that, you can easily do a simple VLOOKUP and bring in the nature of transactions to the bank statement analysis. So you can create, like, for example, let's say, for the sake of example, I will not put it here. I'll be careful not to put it here because there are two things. I can actually follow the same approach which I did for the other transaction, which I can do something like a VLOOKUP. I can easily just do highlight my sales, for example. Let me just show you something. Same process. I press F2 equal to VLOOKUP. I choose what I'll use, the lookup value, comma. What am I looking for? Where is it located? What I'm looking for is here, and it's all the way here. And what I need is this second column because I need to know what kind of services they do. However, before I do that, I first lock this. Be pressing my F4 key. F4, and lock that portion, and lock it. The idea is for it to stay within that range because the formula goes down. There's a probability that this table, the data array where I'm sending data from, will go down. So in order for it to stay fixed there, I use F4 to lock them, right? The answer, what I need, is in the second. Yeah. Okay. Take this out, go back to the cell again, select all this all the way to the bottom. I press F4 to lock it. Right here, F4 is also there. My answer, this is column 1 and this is column 2. My answer is in column 2, so I put 2, comma, and I can choose false, and I close the bracket, right? Now, most times, if it doesn't find the answer, it will throw in an error, but I don't always show in an error. So what do? I make use of the function called if error. Now, the value, but if an error occurs, what should you come up with? I put comma and I put just 2 brackets so that it returns a nil and I close it, right? Don't forget, like the other one, I've selected the range, so I press Ctrl and Enter. Okay, understand what's happening. Data validation allow me to do it. I forgot that. Data validation allow me to enter anything other than what a classification that is within that range, right? So for the sake of argument, let's assume, let me do it in this column, right? It makes life easy for all of us. But let me use this. Then I can show you another trick. Is equal to, oh no, not equal to yet. So I like all the cells down to the bottom. Press F2, like we did, equal to VLOOKUP. Select what I'm using, looking the value. Go to my data validation sheet. Select all this, right? Press F4 to lock, comma. My answer is in the second column, which is here. So I put 2, comma. I choose 4 because I want an exact match. So I close my bracket. Then aside that, I want to remember if there's an error, it also shows the error. So I use if error to suppress the error. So I put comma, put my 2 brackets, close it, and I close my bracket, and I press Enter. So it gives me the response for all of them, right? So I'm able to put classifications into this. Now, the reason why I give me an error is that because I put data validation here, it's going to give me a problem, right? Because of it's restricted, and anything that's not within the list, it will throw it off. It will not allow me to enter it there. So there are 2 solutions to that. One is to ensure that whatever I use here is exactly as I've written it here. That's one. Another one is that everything here should form, I should first update it on this list first before I bring it here, so that it's consistent. And that's how we resolve that. So I think that's pretty all. That's pretty all. I don't even know if there's any question by anybody. Yeah. Practically, I'm done. I don't know if anybody has any questions. So this is floor open for everybody to ask questions, just in case they have specific questions that they want to ask as a result of this webinar. Any question, please, my people? Any question? So in the absence of no question, that means we've come to the end of today's session of the webinar. I just hope it was a fruitful one. I want to stop the recording for now. Yeah, so the idea is, most times the ability to analyze or properly structure your data helps you in pinpointing where the problem is coming from, right? And it also helps you in providing insight into the business, if the business needs such insight to help them make proper decisions. So the truth that, to be very honest, initially it may seem like a lot of work when you are doing that process. However, when you do it once and you get it right, you will not go back to do it again. But if you fail to analyze the data and structure it from the very beginning, you may most likely, if you're not careful, you go back to repeat that process. That is not possible. make sure you need to analyze and classify it properly for easy future reference. And that makes your life easier in the near future. Beginning, it may be a lot of work, but later on, you'll get value for that proper analysis.
So basically, the major advantage this process, this method has is that you'll be able to identify the particular transaction you have with a particular customers. Am I right?
Yes, it does. Yes.
It helps you identify the actual transaction. It doesn't mix it or module it up. So
for example, let me give you a typical example, and I'll explain to you why also analyzing into a particular customer is also important. Recently, I did an analysis of a business that is into loans. And the idea was, obviously, when you have a loan, the customer gets a loan from you. At the end of the day, he pays down on that loan. Typically, what should happen is that if you do total, person pays down the loan totally, he's able to see that the loan does not exist anymore, right? And for proper matching of inflows and outflows, when the loan was disbursed to him and vis-a-vis when he was repaying, should be able to match them properly. The difference between the two of them should simply be the interest income end on that loan, right? If I just put that loan, I will not be able to properly analyze and match loan disbursement with loan repayments. Automatically, I'm unable to analyze that particular level of analysis, matching loans with repayment properly. And for a business that has a core responsibility, if I don't properly match, then I have a problem.
All right, thank you very much, Dede. I appreciate your answers. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So Raj is asking a question. He said you have done well, but can you do more telling us more about sites or channel where you can learn more on Excel, most especially this training and others has also been helpful and impacting me. I would tell others that have not registered for April training to do so because they have a lot to gain from accounting year. Thank you. Okay. Now, the thing about it now is that to learn Excel, now, I'll tell you one, accounting year is planning an Excel training. It has not been officially been communicated out to made public yet, but there's a training that is going to commence between most likely in Q2, and the training is focused on accountants. However, there was a time I shared a workbook about functions that accountants could learn and places you could actually learn. Places you could learn for free and places you could learn that you need to pay for, right? So I'm going to show you examples of places you could actually learn. Okay, I don't think I'm sharing my screen, so let me go back to sharing my screen again, where you could learn a lot around learning Excel. So personally, these are platforms I learned Excel from. I have Leila Griana. Leila Griana has a YouTube channel, talks about a lot around Excel, right? Talks different functions in Excel and stuff. And she's very good in sharing knowledge, right? I also have Excel is Fun. Excel is Fun. Excel is Fun is another platform where I do a lot of learning from in Excel, and it has good videos and it has content in terms of workbook you could actually use in learning Excel. Now, these are free platforms. Now, if it's a situation whereby you want to pay, then I go to udemy.com. Udemy.com has paid courses on Excel, right? One course I always recommend are lectures by Leila again, Leila Griani, and she has very good videos on Excel, right? Which you could actually learn from. Now, and if you search for her, she has different courses on Excel. I try to just search. So Excel VBA locking, Excel dashboard, Excel essentials for the real world, and very fantastic courses, right? So you can always learn a lot. And that's, so someone who mentioned Excel Campus. Okay, I don't know Excel Campus. That's new to me, right? So let me see Excel Campus. Yeah, this is Excel Campus, and seems to be a good place too, like someone has recommended, right? So those are the platforms you can learn from, right? And if you are diligent enough, you can actually learn. Trust me, you can learn for free. But if you feel that, oh, maybe a paid classroom learning is what suits you, you can most likely send us an email, and when we're having the Excel training for accountants, you can always get you invited, and it usually, like we do it for a token because we're here to share, learn, and help. Right. I don't know if anybody has any other question. Okay, someone asked if there will be a continuation of this particular one. Okay, so right now there's no other continuation of this particular series. This brings the end to this particular series, except there are specific questions that people want us to address. The idea was to put in structures in place and explain what could help you properly analyze the bank statement. Now, there may be challenges people face, which I've not addressed, but you can always reach out via mail or via chat, and we can address those specific questions. And I was hoping that people ask questions, and because when you ask questions, I need to give you reasons why you need to do things you do, and also give you responses to how you could solve certain challenges when faced with them, right? And like I said, there will be other series, not necessarily analyzing bank statements. If there are specific questions that you want to ask, or there are things that you think Accounting Yard can create a webinar on to help you improve your knowledge, you can send us an email. We'll put it into consideration. If it's a place that we see a lot of people have that kind of problem, we organize a webinar to address that particular challenge in accounting. Right. So that's the idea. I know people have been asking for analysis of banks or analysis of financial statements. People have been asking for financial modeling. Right. And trust me, for like financial modeling is going to be quite deep, and it requires a lot. It's not just a one-off training or a one-off webinar. Right. So that's what I can say. In the absence of okay, someone said, can there be a training on setting up internal control? Okay, that we can put that into consideration, and we'll put that in our plan and see what we can do about that. Right. Okay, in the absence of none, thank you everybody for making our time for this webinar. Do have a lovely weekend. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and tell your friends about this. Thank you, everybody. Cheers. Bye.